Before we get into this episode, I wanted to introduce one of the partners for the show, Move Pre-Workout. I've been using this over the last year and can massively see the benefit with all my training. And I thought I'd invite Tom along, who was involved in the formulation.
Cheers, Mark. Obviously delighted to be supporting the podcast. And so Move Pre-Workout, we've got a strength-based formula, but this one is specifically designed for endurance athletes. And it's one of the first of its kind. We're just focusing on really high-quality ingredients that are going to benefit endurance performance of any kind. So, yeah, we're really excited by the product and delighted to be supporting podcasts like yourself.
Oh, it's amazing. And this is something that you're specifically taking before your training, before your rides, to be in best possible shape. I'd encourage you to give it a try. Go to movepreworkout.com and for a 20% discount, put the word endurance in at checkout. On with the show. Welcome to the Endurance Podcast with myself, Mark Beaumont, and Martin Mansell. It is a very blowy morning. The sun has just come up. We're in Gran Canaria. And we're on one of our epics, which means we've just had a couple of big days on the bike and everything's big out in Gran Canaria. There's no flat. And we brought out some amazing guests. So the first conversation this morning, even though we're filming it in early December, this will make sense because you're probably listening to this if it's the episode's just come out in March, April, May, because we've held this one back. It's a goodie because Sarah Ruggins has news for the world, which is why we're putting this out sort of mid-series. So welcome to the podcast, Sarah. I'm not going to try and do your background for you because I think it's a lot more authentic if you do it yourself. But Sarah Ruggins, PhD. I was going to say doctor, but I don't actually want you to sort of do sort of a medical treatment on me because you're very much a different type of doctor. The academic side of your life will definitely come to, but I think maybe we should start with your passion for the bike, and you've absolutely schooled us over the last couple of days. You've been the first to the top of every hill. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, incredible. Never seen anything like it. And I thought you were strong.
No, exactly. No, it's been an absolute pleasure not just watching your career over recent years, Sarah, but then actually getting to ride with you. So welcome to Gran Canaria.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible trip so far.
It's been a ton of fun. The whole point of doing these rides and records is you get to hang out, you get to have conversations that you would never have unless you were riding alongside somebody on a 15-mile climb, which we can say we've actually done now after
Two 15-mile climbs in one ride.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that? That's the toughest ride I've done with you in terms of ascent.
Well, it wasn't just the riding, was it? It was the weather. When we got to 3,000 feet, all hell broke loose. And you suddenly weren't in Gran Canaria anymore. You could have been in Everest.
It was challenging. I think because we were coming in the UK winter to Gran Canaria, we all underpacked, underestimated. But when you go to altitude, anything can change, and it was it was fun, type 2 fun, pretty gnarly. Everyone was very cold, and we actually had to be quite careful on the descents because that was challenging. But 2 massive days on the bike. So we've done first day 200 kilometers of riding with 4 kilometers of ascent. And what was the stats yesterday?
I'm sorry, I can't do kilometers, but it was just over 80 miles with about 10,000 feet of ascent.
And a huge up.
Which is pretty big climbing. We'd done 9,000 feet after 50 miles, yeah, which is enormous.
Good training for Europe next year. It's all good miles. And again, because we're recording this in December, but we're putting it out March, April, we might as well just cut to the chase and then we'll do the backstory. What do you want to tell the world? What's happening next?
Yeah, well, what's happening next for me, we decided to build on the success of the LEJOGLE ride in May 2025, and we're going for North Cap to Tarifa in June 2026.
Sounds familiar, don't you think, Martin?
Yeah.
That rings a bell.
Misery loves company.
Yeah.
So.
We'll do the compare and contrast in a minute. You're very much going solo. And
Yeah.
when you say building on, for an audience who's just learning about who you are, your prowess in the bike, talk us through the last year, because you've not been a rider your whole life.
I haven't. No, the bike is very new to me. So I actually purchased my first bike as an adult in April 2023. And in the space of the last 2.5 years, I've done 2 transcontinental races, and in May 2025, it culminated with my world record ride, LEJOGLE, which is Land's End, John O'Groats, Land's End. In our case, we did jog LEJOG, so John O'Groats down to Land's End and back up to John O'Groats. So relatively new to the bike. I have gone tunnel vision the last few years to just try to learn as much as I can, learn from others such as yourself, and just see what my capabilities are. And it's been a wild journey, but one I wouldn't trade for anything.
So what time did you do that record in? What time did you beat? What was the previous record? And what did you do? Man's record and female record?
Yeah, so the all-out record is the men's world record that is held by James McDonald since 2017, and that was 5 days, 18 hours, and 3 minutes. And I had the good fortune alongside my crew to finish in 5 days, 11 hours, and 14 minutes.
Wow. And
Yeah.
what was the previous woman's record?
The previous women's record was held by Louise Harris, and it was about 10.5 days.
Wow. So you literally halved it
Yeah.
and beat
Yeah.
the overall record.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did that work logistically, if that's the right word, in terms of how far were you cycling each day? How many, not how far, but how long were you cycling each day? What was the interval of breaks, and how much sleep did you get?
Yeah, so our process was integral to the success of the entire record. So in my research and in speaking with others, what I found is slippage in the logistics is what will lose records. So from the very outset, I wanted my team to be acting like an F1 team. Like everything was scheduled down to the minute. So what my ride process looked like was 4 hours on, 10 minutes off, ad infinitum, until we started and then until we finished. And the only exception to that pattern would be if there was a mechanical. We were fortunate we didn't have a single one. And when I slept. And we were sleeping about 90 minutes every 24-hour period. But there was one day where I went without sleep and we just did 2 20-minute cat naps. That pushed it a little bit too far. But
Which day did you go without sleep? Was that at the beginning or near the end?
that
Or in
was
the middle?
that was on the night of night 3 into day 4. I was feeling quite strong, but as we know, before things go downhill, you usually feel at your best because your body's compensating, right? It's going into survival mode. So the crew was like, "She's riding great. The weather is great. Let's just go for it." And then the next night, I paid for it.
You say as we know, as if everyone's done that degree of sleep deprivation. Break it down for the audience. The psychological, but also the physiological journey that you go through. You know, the honeymoon period at the start when you're fresh and you're excited.
Mm.
You know, playing the long game. And you said, you said the good fortune. You know, that wasn't fortune. That was planning.
Mm.
And I love this idea that it's minimizing the faff off the bike.
Yeah.
You know, that rings true for my round the world record. You don't have to be the fastest. You just need to minimize faff.
Yeah.
And that real sort of military precision around it is incredible, but it's something you own before you turn a single pedal stroke. So take us through the whole ride in terms of how you visualized it, and then the reality when you're on the bike.
Yeah, so how I visualized the ride was my expectations going in, and what I was communicating to my crew, first of all, was we had this concept of relentless progression. So that's what we framed everything on. You know, we had that taped on the dashboard of all the crew vehicles. So if you are on shift and you're crewing, what can you do to help us move forward? That was our ethos. And something else we communicated was I'm not going to thank them for letting me rest. I'm going to thank them for getting me to the end of this record. So that's kind of how we framed the entire process. And when it came to the breaks, everything was incredibly well rehearsed ahead of time. None of my crew were really cyclists. We all came from interdisciplinary backgrounds because I thought that would lend itself to strong problem solving and a strong, robust team. But when I would come into the breaks, for example, the mechanic would take the bike. He knew it was his job to do a quick check on it. I would run to the loo. I would change my clothes if I needed to. Then I would be eating about 1,500 calories while sitting on a sports massage table, while my crew chief, who's also my partner Ryan, would be briefing me on the next 4 hours stint ahead. So everything was, as you mentioned, with military precision, and that was something we were unwilling to compromise on. And for me as a rider, what my process really was is I did not want to know where I was versus the record for the entire ride until the last day. For me, it was about following my process and minimizing distractions. So my process, when I was riding, it was my cadence, it was the power I was pushing, and my heart rate. And if it wasn't one of those three things, including how good or how poor I felt, it was peripheral. And so I really kind of entered this moving meditation where what was on my screen ahead of me was the only thing that really mattered. And that really helped me stay focused, stayed aligned, and allowed me to delegate everything else to my team. I had one job, it was to follow that computer, and my team was to make all the other decisions on my behalf.
What kind of briefing was Ryan giving you? What kind of information on what's ahead was he saying? Like, there's some really nice trees, there's a lovely forest over there, you're going to pass a nice farm? Or what kind of information was he briefing you on?
More so on the quality of the roads, if I was going to be on, really heavily trafficked areas, if there was any detours, things of that nature. If I was feeling quite weak at the time, it would just be, notifying me who would be in the follow vehicle behind me, asking if I needed anything. We had an objective checklist so the crew could kind of monitor my mental and physical state going through, which helped them kind of adapt and manage me.
And what were those telltales? Because again, for the aspiring endurance listeners, you've already answered the question in terms of who was in charge. You're the monkey on the bike, which is the phrase I always use for myself. So so you're not trying to micromanage the project from the bike, because when you get super sleep deprived, I'm sort of putting my way of thinking onto you. You can disagree on any of these points. You sort of go into idiot mode, and you go into that sort of meditative cycle. So you've got to trust your team, and that's really hard to do when it's your project. But then, so the UK is a very crowded little island, and so there's so much which is outside of your control. You can be having, the best ride possible, but it's a small island with very fast changing weather patterns, lots of traffic, times of day really matters. There's a hell of a lot that you can't control. So again, maybe building on Martin's point, just break down that sort of thinking. How do you sort of think of it in terms of chapters? And then, of course, by the time you've raced that race, you've then got to turn around and do the whole thing in reverse.
Yeah. I mean, so we controlled what we could. So, and then for the things we couldn't control, we planned it in terms of probabilities of outcome. So, for example, one of the conditions we were grappling with is what time do we start our departure? And we knew approximately the mileage I was going to cover in day one because, you're fresh, hopefully not too much disruption on the first day. So we planned our start time around when we would be passing through major cities because we didn't want to go through a major city at rush hour and be delayed in that sense. So there was little things we could do at the start to control the controllables when it came to the pacing and, the logistics of the record. And then after that, it really just became a matter of setting the tram lines for the crew. So my riding pattern, what to look for in terms of sleep deprivation, and then just having them manage that as we went.
And in terms of busy cities and traffic that you mentioned, a real big frustration is obviously cars on the road when you're out riding and trying to go fast. They're such a pain, aren't they? Getting in your way. How did you deal with that? Which was the biggest city you went through? How did you deal with that? Did you have any near misses? Did you have any anyone pull out on you, not looking, as drivers quite often do? And you've got to have, and in particular, I find, I'm sure most riders find, you've got to have eyes all around your head, even in the back of your head, because you can see what's happening ahead of you before it happens. You know that old lady's going to pull out in front of you. You know it already before it happens.
And then when you're tired, your reactions slow down.
Exactly, that's
So
the
it becomes
point I'm
about
coming
safety.
to. So which was the busiest city? Were there any near misses? And did that get harder as it went on? Did you find you got more likely to not see that car coming out where you'd normally see it, or were your support team helping control that as well?
Yeah, so the support team was integral. You have your wits about you the first few days until the sleep dep really starts to manifest. So we had no near misses. Our support vehicle, so my follow vehicle, was a Volkswagen camper. So that was no more than 10 meters behind me, 24 hours a day for the duration of the record. And what that really allowed me to do was ride more aggressively, more into the center of the lane and take up space without fear of, any near misses from traffic.
Yeah.
And from a safety perspective, we had the follow vehicle. It was all lit up. There was signage everywhere. So we did get a bit of rubbernecking, people trying to slow down next to us, take photos and try to understand what was happening. But from my perspective, I would much rather them be slowing down and trying to take pictures and being aware of what we were trying to do than trying to blow past us and risk an accident. Um, when I was feeling fresh, it was quite easy to move quickly through the cities. Exeter was really busy, and I knew, for example, that I would lose the follow vehicle going through the city because I was moving faster than the traffic could. So we planned for that. So they would typically give me a handoff as we were approaching the city. So I would have the fluids I needed, any snacks I needed, and then they would get around to me on the other side of the city and catch up again. So there's a bit of self-reliance going through those cities, but again, it's something that we had prepared for. As I got more fatigued, I found myself having to stop purposefully at intersections, even if there wasn't traffic, because I was really struggling to manage my surroundings and really kind of discern what was happening around me. So where I wouldn't have to stop before, I would have to stop in the final few days and just make sure there was no cars coming before I went going again.
That's
So,
yeah, I can relate. But I mean the
yeah.
the level of sleep depth that you went through, and I think the real empathy comes from the people who have done similar things. James Mill lives pretty near me in Edinburgh. I've had the pleasure of riding with him as well. What was the reaction when you broke the record? I mean, not just from people like James, but also from the wider cycling community, because you haven't grown up in the sport. It made me chuckle when the BBC news article said that you were from Gloucestershire. I mean, you just need to listen to you speak for a second to realise that you're not from
Yeah.
Gloucestershire. The UK press always claims you, don't they? I mean, the
Yeah.
Dundee Courier thinks I'm from Dundee, and the national press thinks you're from England. I don't talk about the fact I'm born in Swindon. But my point being, like, you grew up in Canada.
Correct.
So two-part question, which you can take whichever way you want. A, what was the reaction of the cycling press? And then, outside of the UK, did this have ripples back, back home, back to Canada, and where you started your athletic journey?
Yeah, it did have ripples back to Canada, which was lovely actually. So I work with Live Cycling. They backed me for the record, and Live Cycling has a big presence in Montreal, actually, which is where I was born, and they were hugely supportive and kind of amplifying that. So it was really lovely to get some shout outs from back home. The cycling press, the reaction to it was incredibly humbling, actually. When I embarked on this, it was very much a personal project and one where I was just wanting to test my limits. So I genuinely didn't think it would get too much interest. And, we received over 140 international headlines off the back of it. And that was one of the most humbling experiences of my life, just that people were interested in the story, it resonated. But something I found interesting with the press ahead of time in the cycling press was there was a lot of attention on my inexperience. And I remember there was a magazine that ran a headline that I had bought 4 kilos of Haribo just in case ahead of the ride. And it was a little bit tongue in cheek, saying, oh, could she actually do this? Um, and at the time I thought it was funny, but reflecting on it, there was a lot of it caused a bit of a stir, I think, me being a newcomer to the sport, a female in a male dominated sport, saying I was going after a men's record. So it created a really interesting conversation. So
You're being polite. Interesting.
yeah.
Did this give you more fire?
I,
I'm sensing you don't need more fire. Like, you're pretty self-motivated, but it's interesting when the world doubts you.
yeah, and I think as a woman who works in a male dominated sector, I work in finance, who now competes in a male dominated sport. I think people doubting you is actually a superpower. In a way, it kind of takes the pressure off me when there's almost no expectations of you. And then and my confidence comes from knowing that I outwork almost every other person I know when it comes to my training, when it comes to the event prep, and when it comes to the team that I've built. And so that inner confidence, I think, is what gives me the fire to go out and back myself and say, I'm going to take on the men's record. And if I fail in that, that's fine because I've stood up, I've been brave, and hopefully in doing that, that encourages other people to take up space in the sport as well.
The Endurance Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Enjoy Travel. Huge thanks for all that they do. And I don't need to introduce my co-host, but over to Martin Mansell to explain Enjoy Travel.
So Enjoy Travel brings you car hire, hotels, airport parking lounges with a loyalty platform, meaning you buy 9, you get your 10th free. And you can mix and match across any range of our products. You don't need to just buy 10 car hire, you could buy a hotel, a car hire. And we're giving you a special discount code to celebrate our podcast, which is RID3R, as in rider, and you'll get up to 30% off everything.
So click on Enjoy Travel. It's been amazing for these epics, makes our travel so much more enjoyable and seamless. So thanks Martin, thanks Enjoy Travel.
Something you've talked about a few times over the last 2 days as we've been riding together, in particular up hills where you've tended to drop me quite quickly, is the point of failure. You train to the point of failure, you ride to the point of failure. What does that mean?
So my training is incredibly challenging, but sustainable. So prioritizing recovery is a really big, tenet for me in my training. But in my events, I have one a year, and I bring myself to the point of failure because I'm really interested in understanding what my limits are mentally and physically. And I feel like I'll never know how robust I am or what my capabilities are unless I bring myself to that point of failure. So my coach told me before LEJOGLE that endurance athletes are like containers of water. And throughout the course of the event, you have small holes poked in the container where the water starts to slowly drain. And it's your job as an athlete or your crew's job to plug those holes with nutrition, rest, pain management. But by the event's end, if you've timed it correctly, your container should be empty. And it's a very delicate balance. It requires a lot of self-awareness and discipline. And that's what I really love to think about and plan for in my events. And I'm just hoping to expand that to a bigger scale when I do the European record.
So is that point of failure something which purely you train to find it and allow yourself to fail because you found it? Or is that something that you then carry through into the event and you find that as soon as you can whilst you're on your event and you maintain it like a biting point in a clutch? Is that the concept or is it something else?
No, that's a great question. A biting point of the clutch is actually a good way to describe it. I think when you think about an endurance event, when you start, you should, if you get your taper correctly, you should feel like a greyhound or like a compressed spring ready to go. And so from the first few days, it should be like an exercise in self-restraint and kind of managing that effort. And then through time, your body will understand what you're asking of it, and it will settle into this process where you feel like you can go forever. And I call that like a flow state or moving meditation. And then almost it's like a slingshot, where the pebble is on the downward trajectory, and it's like, can I get to the finish line before this pebble hits the ground? And it's that area that I'm really, really interested in, and like, how long can we prolong ourselves before we kind of crash out? And we didn't get it perfect in the LEJOGLE record. I lost consciousness when I was riding my bike and went into hypoglycemic shock on the night of night 4. Into day 5, and I still had 520 kilometers left of the ride. But thankfully, that's what the crew is for. They picked me up, they made decisions that saved the record, and we were able to execute. But that point of failure is fascinating for me and one I want to try to explore a little bit more.
So you found that point of failure and borderline failing, but the crew managed to recover it for you.
Yeah.
And what can you remember of that? How long was the period? A few minutes or half an hour? Or how long was it and what can you remember of it?
Yeah, so I don't remember what much. It's based more on the stories I've heard after the fact, but apparently I was riding, it was dusk. I started wobbling quite severely into the center line, so the crew was on the horn trying to keep me awake, and then I just apparently lost consciousness, fell into a nettle bush.
Or like side planked?
Yeah, side planked. So my mechanic ran out, picked me up. The head of our logistics was shining a blue light in my eyes to try to wake me up, and they had glucose gel that they were giving me with a whole lot of caffeine. That got me lucid enough to make it to the RV, which was a few miles down the road, and then they put me down for about a 2-hour nap, which was the longest break I had up until that point. And then that sorted me out, and we were able to rally the last 500 kilometers to the finish.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, but it goes to show you, I mean, with these records, my name is against the record, but it takes a community to get you to the finish line, and that's something I really wanted to celebrate.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to know, to take on anything truly hard in the endurance world, you have to be a dreamer.
Yeah.
You have to be able to imagine a different future. You have to be able to sort of really own that idea of doing that physically, mentally, logistically. But when you're in it, when you come back around, you've had your longest sleep on the recovery on the whole ride, and you get back on the bike. Can you remember what you were thinking about at that point? Are you still inspired by the result? Are you scared of losing it all? Like, how does that work for you in terms of, where I'm fascinated with any endurance athlete is the lived experience of going from the dreamer to the doer. How do you go from the aspirational positive mindset to the, what I call the performance mindset, which is, actually, I'm not particularly inspired right now, but this is what has to happen. I don't know. How do you think about these things? Do you think about that scale, or have you got a different way of thinking about it?
No, it's a good question. I felt inspired the whole time. The entire time, and even when I was really struggling and in pain and not really knowing where I was, from the sleep debt, how I was feeling emotionally about being in that situation for me was irrelevant, because I had a job to do. My job was to get on my bike when my crew told me to get on my bike. So how I was feeling about that didn't matter. So it didn't take up space in my mind.
Love it.
And this was a mindset practice that had been instilled in me the last few years through training. Because you can whinge about going to work every day, but it doesn't change the fact you have to go to work.
And it's your choice.
It's your choice. And what a gift we have to be surrounded by people who love us, who are willing us to the finish line, to have a body that's capable of putting up with quite severe punishment. So at that time when I got up, I was certainly not in a good place, but I was able, through the mindset I had kind of curated over the last few years, to just completely compartmentalize my emotions from the task at hand. And what really kept me going was knowing that I had 8 people on the road with me who were taking time away from their families, who would not let me fail. So at that point, I was riding for them. I wasn't riding for me.
That's so powerful. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, you spoke a little bit about you're new to cycling. Incredible. You're new to cycling, and then you've just done that. How did that happen? 2 or 3 years cycling, from hardly or not cycling at all before that. How did that happen? What came before it, and what was the transition? Did you just wake up and think, I'm going to start cycling?
Yeah. So I came to cycling because of an injury. I was an ultra runner. And as a lot of ultra runners know, they retire to the bike. And
Not that it's easier. Not that it's easier.
It's not easier. No. It's the physicality is completely different, but it just stresses different muscles. So I was training for the LEJOGLE running record, the one-way running record. And I've had health issues most of my life. And my doctors eventually told me my bones were brittle. And they said, you can't run anymore. It's ruining your physicality, your quality of life. And a few months before the LEJOGLE record was supposed to happen, I fractured my femur in 3 places. And that was kind of the nail in the running coffin. And throughout my whole life, every time I get derailed, I've always been told you have a choice. You can accept defeat, or you can knock on a different door. We don't have to be one thing. I don't have to just be a runner. I can be whatever I want. The rules are made up. You can do whatever you want. So I decided to pick up a bike. I bought my first bike, and I had to learn how to ride it.
What bike was it?
It was a Cannondale Topstone Carbon 3 gravel bike. And 5 months later, I did the Transcontinental Race number 9.
Wow.
With great difficulty.
So quickly, what is the distance and the amount of days, and a quick 2-minute detail on the transcontinental race?
Yeah, so the transcontinental race is known as one of the hardest endurance races in the world. So it traverses the European continent. It's approximately 4,200 to 4,500 kilometers every year, self-supported. So you're your own SOS, mechanically, navigationally, nutritionally, everything. And I can't remember. So in 2023, I actually ended up scratching about 400 kilometers from the finish. I was tied for the third place pair, because I fell and I fractured my wrist. So my bike handling still needed a bit of work. But the next year I came back in 2024 even stronger, and finished near the front of the field. So it was trial by fire, for how to learn how to ride a bike. But the community was so welcoming. And the people I met there have changed my life and really gave me confidence that, I belong in this sport, and people will catch you if you jump.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And how then? So moving on a little bit, how can you take what you've done from that to your record, 5.5 days, roughly? How do you translate that then to Nordkap to Tarifa, or Tarifa to Nordkap, as you're doing it next year? It's obviously significantly longer. Can you do the same? Can you go the same intensity, the same lack of sleep for something like 2 weeks, let's say?
It's interesting, isn't it? So I think what I've learned in going from the transcontinental races to more of this kind of time trialing crude events is there's a big difference between riding your bike far and riding your bike far fast. The training and the support you need are completely different, in my view. So what I loved about the transcontinental races is it taught me how to ride a bike. It taught me how to be self-reliant, and it taught me grit. But what I didn't like about them was all the faff. So I didn't like having to stop, trying to find a place to sleep, trying to find food. It slowed me down. So I became really interested in more of the British tradition of time trialing, where if my only job was to ride my bike, what could I do?
Yeah.
And so that's what inspired the LEJOGLE record. I wanted to see just how far and how fast I could ride my bike and what the training would look like to do that. And when I reached that point of failure, with the sleep deprivation, with the intensity of the mileage, that's now a benchmark for me. I understand what that feels like. And with that experience and that knowledge, I know I can push farther than that now. And so that's the inspiration behind the Nordkap to Tarifa record. Is I found that limit in LEJOGLE. I think I can meet that limit again. I've since improved. I'm stronger on the bike, and I think I can match that mileage and that intensity for a longer period.
For almost 3 times the amount of period.
Yes. Yes, it won't be easy, but this is the point of it. We need
I'm
to be
glad
brave.
you said that. It won't be easy.
It won't be easy, but it's I think courage and bravery. You need to talk to yourself like you are capable of it,
Yeah.
and your physicality will hopefully rise to meet your own expectations for yourself.
So how will you find that new point of failure then? You found your point of failure and recovered from it during your record in LEJOGLE. How will you find that new point of failure, doing the same thing 3 times as long, between now and the few months ahead when you're gonna take it on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, it's about entering this point of continuous stress in my training. So you're compounding your training day after day. You're not reaching the point of failure in your training, but like I'm tired, and I'm teaching my body to perform under fatigue and under increasing load. So that's one element that I'm going to take forward into the event. So my body will understand what I'm asking it to do. I think what I'm most concerned about is the cycling is the easiest part of these events. Mark, I don't know if you find this, but I find most of the time the cycling is easy. It's death by 1,000 cuts. So it's the sleep deprivation, it's the gastrointestinal management of the calories you need to eat, and it's the conditions and the weather that your body has to contend with, which I find to be personally more challenging. So from finding my limits, I'm confident in the physicality of my cycling. I'm more concerned and nervous about how to manage all the others.
One big change in your life since the LEJOGLE record is you've given yourself the time. You've stepped back from the day job. I mean, your work training schedule and the build up to LEJOGLE was insane. We've chatted about it on the bike rides, but you've really prioritized the bike now. You've gone pro. You're riding full time, and that's incredible for somebody who's used to being so busy and working this around a 9 to 5. That must be a completely different headspace, having one goal, one ride, one event to aim for.
Yeah, it's been a big change these last few months. So leading up to LEJOGLE, I had quite a demanding corporate job, Monday to Friday, and I was training up to 34 hours a week, some weeks. So literally every hour of my days, 7 days a week was scheduled. And it was a privilege to be able to do that. Looking back on it, I don't know how I managed it, but I did. And so I really wanted to give myself a gift at this point in my life. I have this opportunity and I want to fully grasp it. So I've taken a 1 year sabbatical to focus on cycling, and making that my full-time job has really changed my perspective of the bike. It's allowed me to interrogate, I think, my skills and my capabilities a little bit more. And it's allowed me to build a stronger relationship with the sport and the people in the industry, which I found really rewarding as well. Because I just didn't have time before.
I've loved it even over the last couple of days, because when you do something like break the record, you have people assume that you've grown up in this world, and I've noticed you riding with us and some of the other riders, Sean and Hamish, and you're still watching, you're still learning, you're going you're watching lines into corners and whatnot. So even though you've smashed it and taken yourself to these extremes as an athlete, you're still hungry to learn, and you keep commenting on other riders, and I think that's wonderful. You're open to
Yeah.
that learning process.
Yeah, I almost think you need to approach everything with the beginner's mindset, and I hardly know anything about cycling. It's like I'm serious. I know how to push myself, and I know how to do what other people tell me to do. So I follow exactly what my coach says. I'm capable of doing that. I'm capable of riding to power and following instructions. But when it comes to surrounding yourself with people who live and breathe the sport and have grown up with the sport, there's things I would never be able to pick up unless I'm surrounded by them. So that's what I'm really enjoying over this period now, is just, the diversity of backgrounds in cycling, the diversity of skill sets, and just trying to absorb everything I can.
What I love about your story, and it's the same with you, Martin, is you represent a lot of the audience for endurance.
Yeah.
Where you're constantly hungry to go on adventure. It doesn't need to be for break records, but the wanderlust of it, just the places the bike can take you, and you're just keen to learn. You're open to that. It's not necessarily about like race club culture. It's about the freedom of riding a bike, whatever that means to you. I'd love to, if you're happy, to have a conversation about the fact that none of this was destined to happen. There was points in your life where you had no idea whether you could run or ride or break records, but maybe as a way into that, and as an unusual way into it, you've commented, again, we've had the privilege of having a couple of days on the bike with you, about your art, which is incredible. And you were telling me that when some of the art was done, some of your tattoos were done, you had no idea what the artists were going to draw.
Yeah.
And your motivation to go on this journey with the art, but then also your relationship with your own body, because I think that's a really interesting way into the conversation, to go from a point in your life where you maybe thought, well, I don't know how I could do any of this, to where you are today. So I don't know if you've chatted about this before, or you're happy to, but I would love to understand that process of giving somebody else the freedom to create tattoo art that you have, which is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
The art part I find fascinating, because it really relates to the fact that in this chapter of your life, you're trying to figure out what your body is capable of, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, tattooing, I came to tattooing maybe slightly differently to most. I mean, I got my first tattoo and it, didn't really mean anything. It was more of a rebellion against my parents, if anything, when I was young. But I decided in my mid-20s, I think I was 24, to start getting some larger tattoos. And then that eventually snowballed. And within the space of 3 years, I had a full bodysuit done, all by the same gentleman. Him and his wife are good friends of mine. And for me, tattooing was more about the process and not exactly what the art was or what the end result was. And after I had been through what I had been through in my life, I had a really strong disconnection between my mind and my body. I didn't trust my body. I didn't understand how it was reacting to different stimuli. I had to heal my entire nervous system. And so the process of tattooing was really interesting for me because it forced me to sit there, feel something uncomfortable, but really kind of start making that emotional connection to my body again and what it felt like. So for me, it was a way to reclaim my physicality. And it was also a way for me to choose how I represent myself in the world. So,
That's fascinating.
yeah.
For anyone, and for me too, if you're happy to talk about it, because I don't know all the details, if you're happy to talk about it, can you tell us a little bit about what happened around that time of your life? What your illness was, what the result was, what it was all about?
Yeah, so when I was 15, 16 years old, I was preparing for Junior Olympics. I had, run Commonwealth Games qualifying time. My whole life was in front of me. I knew what I was going to do and it was going to be easy. And I ended up having some tendon and ligament damage in both of my feet caused by overtraining, naturally. And so I made a decision with my parents and my orthopedic surgeon to have a minor routine operation on both of my feet at the same time. I would go into a wheelchair for about 4 to 6 weeks while that healed, but then that would allow me to be back on the track quickly. What happened after the first operations were I stopped healing. Instead of the pain improving, it got worse. And I slowly began, losing circulation in my feet. It progressed up my limbs, and that also coincided with immobility. So I lost the ability to start wiggling my toes, my ankles, and over the space of about 2 to 3 months, it tracked up to my knees, my hips. I lost the ability to move my legs. And then it tracked up to my arms. So I had frozen shoulders and elbows. And eventually my hands were locked as well. So I couldn't move my hands. I lost about 40% of my body weight and all of my hair. So I went from being highly capable, independent young woman to somebody who needed 24/7 medical support. And the disease I was diagnosed with is called complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS. It's sometimes known as reflex sympathetic dystrophy. And it's been called the second most painful condition known to modern medicine. So, in addition to the immobility, I had incredibly severe pain that was unable to be treated by painkillers. So, you're basically living in a prison every day. And I lived with that for several years.
And was that then, so from the point where you overtrained, you had the problems you described in your tendons, ligaments, to having that operation, was that something they should have known could happen, or was it a human error, or was it just some freak, really unfortunate, hugely unfortunate thing? What caused that to happen? Do you
It
know?
was the latter. So the surgeries were a success.
Right.
Yeah, they were very routine and uncomplicated, but it was basically a reaction of my nervous system and then my immune system. And it's more prevalent in females for whatever reason, but it can be triggered. It is a rare condition, but it can be triggered by operations or injuries to the limbs. Um,
And
I've
what's the percentage of chances of that happening? Do you know? Did they tell you? Do you know?
I don't know offhand,
Is
but
it really low or
it's quite low. It's
quite
quite
low?
low. Yeah,
I'm
probably
fascinated.
single percentage points.
And clearly, because I mean, you're young. A pillar of your identity in your young life, your teenage life, was sport. But then your late teenage, early 20s are, you're kind of in many ways defined by the person you are at that age. Your favorite music is the music you were listening to at that point. Your friendship groups are formed. You're going through this incredible trauma. And the pillar of your identity, which is your sport, is not there.
Mm.
So I'm not expecting you to sort of capture all of that, but how do you think about those sort of pillars of your identity? I mean, I'm hearing from the conversation sort of an incredible inner drive, but when you can't turn that inner drive into something physical. There's not a physical iteration of that. I don't know. How do you reflect on that period, and what was the journey back from it like?
Yeah, it was an incredibly challenging journey back. Before the illness, I defined myself by my successes and what I was achieving. So I was undefeated for 3 years. I set multiple national records. That's who I was. But I realized in hindsight that puts you in a fundamentally unstable position when things don't go to plan. And your value is based on what you are achieving. And it took me years, and I was really thankful that my family, we never stigmatized mental health support. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD after my illness. And so working with a lot of counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists, it helped me really understand that identity cannot be associated with your achievements. Identity needs to be associated with things that are inalienable to you. So now I view my identity as a set of traits or characteristics that can't be taken away from me. So now I am resilient. I am courageous. I am stubborn. And I've reshaped my identity around that. And that gives me a really strong foundation to take my energy and apply it to anything, whether it be my corporate career, my academics, or now my athletics.
That's easier said than done.
It was hard.
I love what you're saying. I'm trying to make sense of it, because
Yeah.
how you see you versus how other people see you, you've just smashed the LEJOGLE record, and now there's a level of expectation around what you can do as an athlete. It's very hard to not be defined by those successes and those milestones.
Yeah, but other people's expectations of me is not my burden to bear, is what I
It's a
would
good
say.
point. That's a good point.
I love it. I'm just trying to make sense of it.
It-
You better ask the next question, because I'm going to have to think about that one. That's amazing. I need a bit of that medicine. I love it.
It's taken a very long time, but it's lessons I've learned the hard way, because I used to frame all the things in my life as failures. I failed as a runner when I was young. I failed, I got my PhD, but you could say I failed as an academic because I couldn't get a full-time professorship. So I went into private industry. I failed as an ultra runner because I couldn't do my LEJOGLE record. You can frame things this way, or you can frame things inwardly and like what your process is and what your identity is. And because I identify as someone who is brave and resilient, I'm succeeding. And whether people expect more of me or not is not my problem. My problem is to focus on what I deem valuable and how I can curate those characteristics in my life. And it takes practice, and it's not always easy, but I'm quite militant and always going back to that.
What techniques do you have then? You say it takes practice. What kind of practice or techniques get you to that stage that you describe now?
Mm,
To summarize a few, obviously, it's probably an enormous
yeah.
discussion, but to summarize a few perhaps.
I would say there's probably two. So the people you surround yourself with matters. You need to surround yourself with people who want to see you win. And that doesn't mean always being your cheerleaders. It means people who will tell you when you're not on the right track or you're not rising to the expectations you should have for yourself. And I would say the other element that I really focus on is how you talk to yourself matters. So even if you don't believe it, there's many times, for example, I get on the bike and I'm like, I can't do this. I'm tired. Like, I don't belong in this, industry or this sport. You have to recognize when those thoughts are coming in, and you need to just nip them in the bud and replace it and say, no, I can do this. I deserve to be here, and I am going to do it. You don't need to believe it, but you need to talk to yourself like you do, and eventually the self-belief will come. So it's the people you surround yourself with and how you talk to yourself.
Does calling you up when you're not, as you just put it, not doing the things you need to do to be successful, could that include or not calling you up when you're focusing too hard, or you're double negative, but you're not just not doing the things you could be not doing to be successful, but you're pushing yourself too hard, or you're just taking yourself slightly in the wrong direction, or is it, how narrow is it, or how wide?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So I think you'll see this probably with a lot of, high performers. You get a singular focus. It takes over your entire life.
Yeah.
And you have a tendency to do too much.
Yeah.
And I'm very much in that category. I
Yeah.
love deep focus and I take it too far. And one of the things I've really been working on the last year with the help of my partner Ryan is knowing when to step back. And that rest and relaxation is just as, if not more important than time on the bike. And that's been a huge lesson for me. It's something I still struggle with, but I'm really grateful that I have people in my life that will tell me to just like sit down and watch a movie. Like you don't need to be on the bike all the time.
What apart from sitting and watching a movie, is there anything else you do to relax? Or take time
Um,
out? What do you enjoy
what do I enjoy
apart from riding your
doing?
bike?
Yeah, I love riding my bike. I'm learning how to paraglide.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so not very relaxing, but
Are you going to become obsessive with that and set a paragliding record?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No, but it's been really great to kind of take this learner's mindset and apply it to something that you know, I know I'll never be good at it, but I'm enjoying that for that express purpose. So I just like trying new things.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been great. So
Before we the close off, I mean, I definitely want to hear a little bit more about what the future looks like on the bike, but it would be remiss to not briefly touch on your academic / corporate career, because the degrees that you have, the time you spent doing your doctorate and then working in finance. What were your motivators through that period? I mean, did you know the things that you've talked about in the last section about purpose, drive, that intrinsic motivation, why you want to do it rather than what the world wants from you. How is that related to the way that you've studied and the way that you've showed up in a completely different way, like in the finance world?
yeah, I think what my life has shown me is that you don't have to be one thing, and often we bucket ourselves. And the way I came to academics is I never saw myself as an academic growing up. As a kid, I was always naturally pretty good at school, but I always thought I would just be an athlete. And after my illness, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I didn't trust my body to be athletic. The only way I could really express my curiosity and my energy was through school. So as an adult, I had to go back and finish high school. And then, yeah, I ended up with 4 degrees in 4 different subjects, culminating with my doctorate. And that for me was an incredible process, just learning a different skill set and exploring the world and exploring what my interests could be outside of athletics. And it challenged me in new ways. And what it really allowed me to do was take a job in industry, in an industry I never really saw myself being in, if I'm being honest. But it challenged me in incredibly new ways, and I'm forever grateful for it.
4 degrees in 4 subjects. What were the subjects?
So I have 2 undergraduate degrees, one in international relations, one in economics. My master's is in the philosophy of economics. And then my doctorate is in financial innovation, particularly in index methodology and construction of index instruments. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing. There's another episode to be done there. I'm always interested to know. You've talked a lot about motivations and what drives you now, but what sort of household did you grow up in? You know, was it quite an isolated one? Was it quite a sociable one? You know, what did that sort of community environment look like? Because I'm interested in the fact that you now live in the UK, a long way from where you grew up. So I'm interested in those sort of strands of continuity and maybe some of that sort of, who were you as like a, you know, like before you were 10, because those formative years are pretty fundamentally important. You know, clearly we you know, fascinating and hugely challenging what happened in your teenage years, but are there parts of your younger life that you carry through to today?
That's a great question. I suppose growing up, we had very energetic households. We moved quite a bit. So I've lived in 9, 10 different cities across North America and now in the UK. And my father traveled for business a lot. So he was in and out. But my mother was a powerhouse. People think I have energy, but I'm like exhausted just thinking about like my mother's day to day. She, um, she started as a day trader. She was trading commodities. She would take my father's paychecks and just like trade them, and that's how they were able to retire early. She taught herself that. She's went on to build businesses and sell them on. She's done that 3 times. And in her spare time, which was very little, she did emergency foster care for children. So she extended every element of her life and her energy to helping others, building businesses and supporting communities. And for me, she's a role model of, the kind of woman that I want to be. So I was incredibly grateful to have her in my life as my cheerleader and role model. But we weren't particularly an outdoorsy or sporty family at all. We didn't really do organized sports. They put me in a track club because I had a lot of energy and they didn't know how to expend it. And that was it. So I found all of this exploration and adventure sport really as an adult. But
I love the caring side of it. The fact that
yeah,
she was, fostering and looking after people, that community aspect of it is pretty formative. When parents are normally looking after their own children, to open their doors and look after others,
yeah,
amazing work.
yeah.
Right, we cannot close off this conversation without talking about what comes next. So over to Martin, maybe to chat a bit more about Europe. I mean, obviously we're fascinated because we're about to do something very similar, different
Yeah.
route, I should say, for the audience. Starting and then finishing in the same point, going in opposite directions. We're going for a team record. You're going for the all-time solo record. So same but different. You're going to be going ahead of us, so we'll be watching, cheerleading for you. Fascinated and to see how you get on. But talk a little bit about the Europe record, the history of that, what you plan to do.
Yes, so the Europe record is traditionally Nordkap, Norway, so up in the Arctic Circle down to Tarifa in Spain, so the northernmost to southernmost points in continental Europe. My route is overland travel, so it's about 6,500 kilometers. Historically, the record's been owned by Rob Gardner and now Ian Walker. That record is 16 days, 20 hours is the time to beat. So as with LEJOGLE, my approach is that I want to find my limits and I want to ride within my capabilities. So we have our own targets and pace to match. If that is good enough to beat the record, it will be good enough to beat the record, but we're using that as an anchoring point to help me try to push my limits.
Can you share those targets at this point or no? Not yet.
So much can
Or is
happen
it a
on the road.
surprise?
Yeah, we'll find out as we go. Yeah, I would like though to try to push to the same limits and mileage I did for the LEJOGLE ride, so averaging maybe 500 kilometers a day, but
Wow.
very much understanding that weather, borders, and a lot of disruption can happen, which is part of the fun of doing
Yeah,
these
true.
records.
Do you know how many countries you'll go through?
10, I
So you'll
believe.
go through 10 countries.
Yeah.
And how much then is there any balance at all between enjoying the ride, purely focusing on the stats as set out that'll be probably in your head now and in your team's head and you're working towards over the next few months? Is there any relationship between enjoying the ride and seeing all the beauty and scenery of all these different countries, or will you be purely blinkers on, focusing on your stats, or is there somewhere in between?
Mm, it'll probably be largely blinkers on. It's not unfortunately it's not really adventurous storytelling travel. For me, I'm approaching it from a performance mindset. So I won't probably be in a position where I can, see the sights too
So you
much.
won't be stopping at a beautiful lake, finding the
Oh,
nicest coffee shop.
maybe for my next ride, but not this one.
It's funny because people have often said, like, don't you think you spoilt the ride by going so damn fast? And I always say, well, it's an absolute privilege to put your cards on the table and say, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And that's an absolute privilege. So, I've used other times in my life to go back and do the wanderlust and the adventure. But there's something unique and very singular about that. I'm all in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Like I feel like I rise to meet my expectations for myself when I have no plan B and the stakes are very high. That is when I perform the best. And so records like this I find incredibly exciting. Um because you're on a knife edge the entire time. So I will be very open. I'm not doing this for adventuring or for storytelling. I'm doing this to find the limits of performance, and in doing so, hopefully set a precedent for women in the sport. So
Amazing.
we'll see.
So that's 2026. 2027, how much are you going to beat Mark Beaumont's around the world by?
Let's see how 2026 goes first. Yeah.
I would be your biggest cheerleader if you went to do that.
Thank
I would
you.
love to see that.
Would you like to crew for me?
Would I like to crew for you? I would love to crew for you. I also have so much respect for crew.
Yeah.
I know the way I'm wired up, and having seen my crew at work, I don't know if I could do what they do. I think
Yeah.
I need to go on that learning curve.
Yeah.
So I would love to crew for you. I would love to. I don't underestimate the task. You know, that ability to look up, look out, and look after others. But I mean, the journey you're on from, 3 years ago, buying your first adult bike properly and getting into the sport. It's been a ton of fun over the last couple of days seeing you still learning. I'm not sure you were learning anything about fitness because you were absolutely schooling us up those hills, but you're still learning as a bike handler. You're still,
Yeah.
but what I love about what you're doing is there's an intensity, but there's a kindness about what you're doing as well. You know, intensity can quite often come across as really hard and really sort of quite sort of shut off. You've got a sort of an openness, and I love the simplicity of the way you describe what you do. You seem completely at peace with what you're doing, even though it's so damn hard, which I love. There's certain aspects that I can relate to. There's other stuff which I'm still trying to make sense of, and I think we all have our own sort of inner language to be able to sort of, and I think for any people listening and watching this episode, a lot of what you say kind of makes sense conceptually, but it's not going to really make sense until you're out on the bike and going, oh, Sarah was saying that thing. Okay, like I'm doing something now, because the theory works at one level, and then the deep understanding happens when you're actually out there living it, which I think was the whole point of podcasts like this. We always said we want it to inspire and inform. There's been a ton of inspiration, but the information that you've shared, I've just absolutely loved. I know we've been battling with the Gran Canaria winds this morning, and it's not quite as warm as it looks, but I've absolutely loved it. So Sarah, you've given up 3 days of your time to come out and ride with us and record.
It's been
loved it.
Incredible. So the last 2 days we've done something like well over 200 miles. We've been around the entire island, the circumference or perimeter of the island. We've been up to the top of the central highest point. Like I say, well over 200 miles and 25,000 feet ascent or something.
Bit of climbing. Yeah,
quite a lot of climbing. Could you pick out any highlights?
Any highlights?
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
Of the last 2 days.
Yeah, I genuinely loved the climb yesterday. So it was exceptionally long, as you said, a few 15-mile segments all uphill. And I don't ride with others very often. Most of my training is by myself. And like that climb yesterday would have been a slog if I was doing it by myself. And so the company was amazing. The chat was amazing. And until the weather turned bad, the conditions were amazing. So I would say that was the highlight yesterday.
We were like a couple of kids. After an hour's chatting, we stopped and filmed a rainbow.
Yeah.
It was great.
It was
Yeah,
incredible.
It was beautiful, wasn't it? The scenery was amazing, beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Until the weather kicked in.
Until it got mental.
Yeah.
Well, there's always going to be bits that are mental. Look, Sarah, on behalf of Martin and myself, thank you so much. We've loved it. You've given up 3 days of your time to come out and ride with us on this epic, and it was epic.
It was epic.
It was epic. So we're gonna follow your journey, and I'm sure we're gonna ride together again.
Thank you so much.